So bycatch is a hell of a thing. So can they be wiped out, the abalone and that? I don't think so. But what can...
Everything. I mean,
No, well then that's a pathetic one. No, it can't. Definitely not. I say it in that camera.
Even fish and fish and fish.
You can fish and fish and fish. You'll never ever kill the resource, but you will wipe it out to the point of commercial extinction where it's not viable to bother about going to catch a fish.
Wouldn't that be a good thing?
Well,
No. We need to manage and nurture everything we have, and we need to make more value out of, like the anchovies, all just get pumped into fish meal. I love eating anchovies, but I've got to buy stuff that's got to be imported from other countries that, that it works. In Argentina, Anje had a branch down there, and I'm not going to mention the guy's name because he's a guzzy, but he's a capitalist big dog. But he went and ran the operation there, and there they declared a marine protected area for the first time on the spot, in the tracks, and the resource came back brilliantly and amazingly. So I'm not and never will be a person that says that there cannot be commercial exploitation. There has to be commercial exploitation. People have to eat fish. People. Let me finish. Don't let me answer something, but you don't give me the opportunity. They have to have jobs. They have to do it, and it is there to be enjoyed. And as long as it's done responsibly and sustainably, I don't have a problem with it.
How does Tristan da Cunha fit into the current picture?
Tristan, I love those boys. Tristan da Cunha. I had a head islander come stay at my fancy house, and I was quite interested in his lobsters at that time. But they're just a small community down there, and they're not the brightest kids on the block. And it was Gaggins and someone else, the founders of Oceana, and that they had the Tristan quite, and then it got taken away from them, and basically it's ended up in the Ovenstone family now.
Another family.
Yeah, always. And they seem to be doing, I think they're doing about 300 ton. It's sustainable. There's a hell of a lot of lobster down there.
Yeah.
It's not going to be wiped out. Unlike Vima. Vima was quite a great story. Vima, I also like this guy, I don't want to mention his name. But Vima, so there's no laws, it's no country, anyone can do what they want, and the next minute these switched on lobster fishermen with the long line trap method of catching them go down to Vima there, and those pots are just filling up, and there's no laws. Well, one family in particular made such a fortune out of it, and then they came here and they noticed in the Anje trawl nets, because then they got into a bit of hake trawling and that, and then in the trawl net they were dragging out here in the deeper waters of the Gullis Banks. There was lobster coming up from there, and then this guy was clever enough to introduce the trap fishery there, and we had a fishery that was doing 600 tons of lobster tails, top tit quality fish, and those guys made a fortune. But they didn't only catch 600 tons, they caught double the amount. But just to talk about, and then Vima is finished. It is not commercially viable to go to Vima anymore. There's no point. So that's what can happen.
Will it become viable again?
And some guys, the smaller guys, will go take a hit down there and they'll come back with 7-8 ton, which is some bread, it's better than nothing.
From my point of view, just bearing in mind that we've had evidence coming up in all the various other talks of the Grand Banks, which used to lower the amount of the baskets and the whole story. And now there's no fish. And from the point of view that we've got other factors working against the fish as well too, like the ocean acidification, the toxins and the great big dead zones in the sea. One thing which you're not taking into consideration is that like large amounts of the sea are just accumulation points, vortexes, where all the plastics and the poisons are accumulating. And from that point of view, the fish are up against enough things as well. I personally think that to just say, okay, anything that we've actually done in our management plan, I so mistrust human management of any resource, because every single time I've seen management, first of all, it tends to be exactly the wrong kind of management, and it ends up just not achieving its ends. And I wouldn't like to say, in this whole context of all the things that we're coming up with, officially, if we just take it as far as Gary, and let's face it, Gary does know a huge amount more than me, so I'm just posing another point of view, and I want to ask the group what you think we should put forward as our mission statement, basically. But I personally mistrust just saying it's fine, business as usual, and just let's make sure we enforce those various laws. I favour something else. I favour that we should have marine reserves, that we should properly enforce them. I favour that we should actually have moratoriums on at least the rock lobster. I favour a moratorium on at least the rock lobster, and possibly a moratorium on anything that's below 20%. As far as I'm concerned, if something's below 20%, why should the rest of the world be? And then I personally think that I hate the idea of the fact that trawling and the way of killing, I don't like it at all. And I think that whatever we can find that replaces that, even the long line fishing, which I know you don't like, I prefer the long line fishing, but I think there must be sound things there must be things to retrieve those nets so that if they become the ghost lines and do those, you know what?
I prefer long line fishing
Yes.
to trawling because you get prime fish, individual
Yes.
fish, higher market value,
And if you do that thing to protect the birds from them, which they can do, they've got this system which protects the birds. And if you give them each a sort of like a satellite recognition, so that when they break off, which they sometimes do, and then sink to the ground, you have these ghost lines, that you have a means of retrieving them, and there's a responsibility for the company that dropped it to retrieve it. There must be an identification that it's their line. Then I believe we should abandon trawling, allow long line fishing, and have some moratoriums on all the fish once they get below 20%. And I think that we must not let the industry itself decide whether that's below 20%. I think we should institute a separate. We should institute a separate thing.
Wouldn't be a good idea. So seriously, I mean, if you look historically at mankind's behaviour, we go and blow the crap out of elephants. They say, "Oh, gee, have you seen their social life? But they're tasty. Oh, we've got nice tusks." Shouldn't we actually consider what we eat before we kill it? I mean, seriously, shouldn't we actually have some studies? They're just coming out now, getting to the point where we're starting to understand and decipher dolphin language. Dolphin can probably tell it. I mean, the dolphin eat fish. Well, let's hear their opinion. And we literally are about to be on the verge of hearing an intelligent opinion from another species.
My way of dealing with things maybe it's not big success, but they have an impact, and they're actually going to make a change in a situation now with lobster. They're actually going to do it. Your approach of save all too green will have no success whatsoever in law.
From here to there. I'm talking about from there. Yeah. But that's another issue altogether. How do we get from here to there?
I believe that's the baby step. First.
That's all that can be done right now.
That's the first baby step. And I don't know what's going to go down, but I think human beings have this amazing ability, especially if we can tap into a poor sort of majority in this country, so they can start to understand some of these things and relate to it. That's the power. And who knows what can come of that. And I reckon these things that Judy talks about, even maybe the things you're talking about, let them evolve to that, you know. I think that's what we're talking about. So I think the fishery thing is absolutely awesome. I've never schemed about it like this.
How far down does the corruption go? For example, how does comics?
Everyone's part of the thing, but I want to say this for Steve. I had got out of the business and I saw these two young guys.
You were like a Steve Emery.
Yes, and I see Steve come along with the poor partner that passed away, and I thought, geez, you guys are coming in at a bad time with the color of your skin and everything, man, you're not going to get anything right. And they've been amazingly successful.
Remember fisheries.
Steve and them got some quotas and things, and I think of people who got quotas, they can justify having those quotas because they actually went and bought a boat. They built a factory. They did create employment. Not like these other people who got this piece of paper and sold it. They actually did something. So I can live with them. And then Steve and them's bulk of their bucks actually comes, in my view, I doubt I'm wrong, is when I&J and the big guys come alongside, and now they've got a hell of a flow of fish coming in, and there's a lot of bycatch with it, that they would move it in bulk rather than take it and cutlet it and fillet it and do the thing. So Steve and them are running a sweatshop for the surplus, and so the big guys don't mind them, and there's work.
So he serves a purpose.
There's work, and then they pay a reasonable fee. So I can live with Steve.
Is he a good?
From what I've been listening to, taking stock or consolidating, It's actually about taking stock, and the taking stock I've seen here today is I've seen two major benchmarks. Fishing, which is a benchmark for all the other industries, and Roger's side of thing with conservation, and they're so linked that actually it's about creating the benchmarks that we can work from. And already there's a solid benchmark here, and there's a solid benchmark here, which should give us a little parameter and education about all the other areas. So thank you very much, because you've educated me quite a lot, and I've begun to see that it's really about taking stock.
Industries have and what way we need to go.
We'd be the only ones in it. High mercury content.
Because in Japan and for instance the levels of mercury there are through the roof. They literally went into the schools and they took fish off the menu altogether because the mercury levels were so high.
It involves everyone's attention. It involves everybody having a look at what they're doing, thinking about what they're doing, using this resource that we have to the best ability under very rigid compliance regimes. The legislation must be stepped up. If you're caught with more than 5 burleys, some guys might pinch one because it's a great thing to eat. But if you go and you're caught with that, or you're caught with 10 of them, it should be like the rape sentence. There's a minimum sentence. Even if the judge is your brother, you got to go to jail for 10 years. Maybe it doesn't have to be that harsh, but until we step up the legislation, bust the guys, burn their ass, they sit in jail, the message won't get home. And that includes taking that from the abalone, small fishing, all the way through to the big guys and locking the bastards up.
Twice a week.
We said that just now.
Well, that's it. Fish sustainably, responsibly, to measurable targets that are predictable, that cannot be gone over the top with, and if there ever is an error, it must be so marginal, it must be a blip.
But you say I'm being greedy by saying once it's below 20% is a moratorium.
No, I agree with you. When it's below 20%, it shouldn't be touched. But I'll tell you that my answer to that, and I'm probably wrong, and I'm happy to be wrong, because I haven't been doing the fight I've been doing with my guys in coastal communities who've been waiting their whole freaking life to be able to have an opportunity. You go down to Doring Bar and you see the hunger in those homes. There is nothing there other than packing some potatoes for a horrible old farmer.
Gary?
A little bit of money. Hold on, let me get you. And then there's lobster right there. My kids are crying. They're hungry. I got to go and steal what is at my doorstep. I don't get an opportunity to go and harvest that and make some pennies out of it so that I can go buy baked beans and milk and bread and things.
Gary, you banished the trawlers.
Hold on. And you want to tell me now that, and I agree with you, 20% is nobody should be fishing. I do. But at the same time, I will not be able to join you in that crusade because they have been waiting since 1940 to get back into action. And they have only got back into action now, and they haven't actually even got to, this is how ugly it is. The long-term allocation of rights was in 2005. And they were left out once again. And a couple were included. Now, these 1,500, you know what had to happen to get the 1,500? There's a commercial quota, there's the recreational catch, and then there's the what they called nearshore small-scale fishers. So they gave them 20% of this whole quota to nearshore. But they didn't include all the poor. So now these guys were left out, and we were marching and we were making chaos because we want opportunity. And we went to the Equality Court, and the Equality Court ruled that these people must be accommodated. And then we managed to get 1,500 of them accommodated, and they had to be accommodated out of the recreational catch. That became reduced. And so then they're in. And now, since 2005, and the arguments were well articulated, they went in long before to Martinez and the people that were making the decisions. They weren't heard, and this minister has been obliged because those rights were allocated, and then if you take them away, there's legal consequences, blah, blah, blah. You got to talk to that lady. We need that attention. And these people have now, the small-scale policy is about to be launched in March, which doesn't give these guys, that doesn't make them super wealthy. It allows them to, for once in their miserable lives that they've had, be able to go off their doorstep there and get some lobsters and maybe sell it to tourists. Or I would happily re-enter the market then and go and help them get their stuff out and get the top dollar for it so that they can buy more bread and milk back there. And now we want to come along here at this point when they're for the first time going to get their go and say, sorry chaps, there's actually nothing left for you.
I'm talking about getting rid of the trawlers. If you get rid of the trawlers, then who's going to do the fishing? The fishing that we do take. No, hang on a sec. If you get rid of the trawlers and you have only the longline fishermen, then those guys who the fishermen will go back to being important again, because that small scale fishing is far better news than the big, huge, massive
Not
trade.
small scale, and the fish are... all you
Yeah,
make is
but I'm
400
saying, but
meters
you can have long line and those little small guys with their little nets that they do. That's
They
okay.
can't catch hake.
Okay, well,
It's 400 meters to
and then there's
800
also
meters.
jobs in patrolling those keeping the reserves. I mean, the reserves.
The monitors, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I say.